All right, it is in the middle of spring here in the Midwest portion of the United States, which means swarm season for beekeepers. Here is a decent sized swarm that had left one of my colonies in my yard and has landed on a fairly small size, fairly young fruit tree in the yard, made it very easy to catch. Initially, we were going to use a bee vacuum to gently vacuum these bees off the tree and move them into a waiting swarm box. We stood around and looked at these bees for several minutes, contemplating our approach. These bees were very gentle, very docile. They had been on this tree for about 2.5 hours prior to us starting to collect them. They were well settled in, easy to work with, weren't easily agitated when we approached them, so we decided we would try to just simply scoop them up, brush them up onto a frame, and move that frame into the swarm box and avoid using the vacuum if we could. So that's our plan of attack here for today. If this video quality isn't quite up to par, I apologize. This video was actually live streamed on the channel while I was catching this swarm. Unfortunately, I didn't quite have the settings right and the video live streamed sideways. So I have since pulled down the video, rotated it, which gives me an opportunity to provide some voiceover so that you can see what we're doing here. Again, we're just taking a long bristle bee brush, very gentle bee brush, and just brushing these bees right off the tree into a pile on a frame of wax, and then we move either that entire frame over into the swarm box, or we shake the bees off into the box and go back and get another cluster. Anytime I collect a swarm, I always give a quick look at the bees that are going by to see if I can see the queen. There she is. We just saw her in this clump of bees that we brushed off the tree, so we know we've captured the queen that was in the middle of the swarm. Went ahead and put that entire frame in the swarm box, and now we know the rest of the bees that we're going to brush off the tree. We don't have to spend a lot of time looking for the queen because we've already seen her. If you're wondering what was in that spray bottle, I carry with me a 1-to-1 sugar mix, 1 part water to 1 part sugar. For swarms, I will often spritz sugar water onto the frame of wax. Does a couple things. I believe it does a couple things for me. I've had great success where bees will focus their attention on consuming the sugar syrup that's attached to that frame, and it seems to encourage them to stay on that frame and stay in the swarm box for me. In my past attempts to catch swarms where I didn't use sugar syrup, sometimes the bees will take flight right away. They'll come up out of the swarm box, they'll take flight. Sometimes they may try to go rejoin the main swarm of bees. Doesn't cost much. It's an easy, simple trick that works for me to encourage them to stay on the frame and stay in the box. Gives me time to collect the rest of the bees and put the lid on the box and move it where I want it before they take flight again. Here we just decided, since we found the queen and we know she's in the box, we put our swarm box on top of a milk crate to try and get it a little bit closer to the height of the rest of the bees still on the tree. The bees that are on the front edge of the swarm box are just fanning their wings like crazy right now. What they're doing is they're trying to waft the scent of their queen, the pheromone of their queen that is in the box, over to the rest of the bees on the tree so that they know where their queen is, so that they know where they should move to rejoin the rest of the colony. Pretty neat, actually. I took a big scoopful of bees and held them in my hands as soon as I carried them over close to the box, close to where the other bees were fanning, they immediately started fanning themselves as well to join their other bees in an attempt to spread their queen scent, their queen's pheromones, so that the rest of the colony would know where they are. So here we're just trying to decide, do we continue to brush off bees onto frames and move them into the box, or should we close them up and let the bees move into the box on their own? We did end up taking several more scoops full of bees and moving them over and putting them into the box, as many as we could. In case you're wondering, we did not get stung while collecting this swarm of bees. We were fully suited up with gloves and veiled, but again, these bees were just very, very gentle. Time of day here is about an hour before sunset, so it was right about 6 o'clock when we started collecting the swarm. We knew we had about 65 minutes before the sun set over the horizon. We figured these bees were probably planning on staying on this tree for the night, so we were able to take our time collecting these bees. Sometimes when a swarm will land on a tree or on a fence post, they'll stay for anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours, maybe a day, while they determine where they want to move to next for their more permanent location. I also, we left these bees here overnight. There was a small cluster of bees that continued to clung to the tree branch. Maybe they hadn't yet figured out where the rest of their colony went. Maybe they were still smelling their queen scent from the time that she was on the tree and they weren't willing to leave quite yet. Whatever the case, left this box overnight. Came back the next morning and all the bees had moved into the box. Bees were foraging and returning just like any normal colony, so we knew that all the bees had eventually made it over into the box just fine. I did give this swarm box, which is essentially a 5-frame nuke, I gave them a hive top feeder with a gallon of syrup in there, just to, again, encourage them to stay and not abscond the swarm box and leave, looking for a different location. Plus, I knew that the 5 frames that I gave them, while fully drawn out waxed frames, they didn't have any honey stores or nectar stores in the frames themselves. The cells were empty. So in order to give them a bit of a head start, I gave them a gallon of 1-to-1 sugar syrup so that they'd have some resources available to them right away. What we're doing here is just trying to get the box set up just the way we want it for the rest of the night, knowing I was going to put a feeder on them. We were trying to get the box as level as we could and as stable as we could. A little deceiving in this video shot, the yard is actually on a bit of a slope, and so the camera has been leveled so that the tree looks perfectly level, but really the yard is on a decent slope here. So while it looks like this box is tipped backwards quite a bit, it's actually now more level, which is great because when we put the hive top feeder on there, we want the sugar syrup in there to be level so that it doesn't slosh out one side or the other and then drown the colony below it. In case you're wondering about distance this swarm had flown from the original colony, you can actually see some of the colonies there in the background behind that shorter looking fence. There's a couple supers on one of the hives back there. The top box is a yellow super with a telescoping cover on top. So the bees for this swarm had flown about 15 feet from the parent colony to this tree that they landed on, which is about what we see annually when we catch swarms from our own hives. There are much larger cedar trees elsewhere in the yard, also about 15 feet away. That's a pretty popular place for swarms to land. Unfortunately, in those larger cedar trees, there's no limbs for about the first 18 feet off the ground. And so when swarms land in those trees, they're much more challenging to get after because they're quite a bit higher up. So, and that's it. So we left this box here, and these bees are fanning, encouraging the other bees in the colony to come over and join them. Overall, it was a great success capturing this swarm.
Close them up for the night, and these other